everyone, Raj Chandra here, CANiVISION Southeast Regional Lead, along with my co-host Chris Jackson out here from the Midwest. And today we are joined by a super special guest, legend in the game, my good friend Tahir Johnson. Say what's up to the CANiVISION Policy Report audience. And I know you got a lot of stuff going on, so we can't get into every single thing that you're doing because we don't have time on the format of the show. But tell us a little bit about what you do mainly and a couple of the projects you got going.
Definitely, it's a pleasure, man. That was a dope introduction, man. You call your boy a legend, man.
You better live up to it. Living legend.
But yeah, like I said, it's definitely a pleasure to kick it with y'all. You know, CANiVISION is fam. Shout out to Rico, of course, you know, y'all and everybody else and my homies. A little bit about me. Currently serving as the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is the cannabis industry's oldest and largest trade association. Well, I got my start in the industry, in the cannabis industry, by working at a dispensary here in Maryland, where you and I both live, Raj. And on that course, I've got the opportunity to do a few different things, applying for licenses in a few different states. I had the opportunity to score applications for a state's cannabis program. And really one of the coolest things that I've had the opportunity to do over the past year was creating my podcast and all different types of content focused on education and uplifting the social equity community. So, you know, it's been a really dope opportunity to just kind of tell these stories, man, and try to use my influence that I can from within inside the apparatus to try to, you know, make change, man. And I'm definitely thankful for people like Chris, who's been, you know, one of my biggest supporters internally to help make things like that happen.
Yo, Raj, my claim to fame, since I've been in this industry, I was on Tahir's show. I think I was number one on his charts for like
2
weeks or something like that, bro.
To be honest, you're still number 2 of all time.
That's my claim.
So you were like, you had like a guest verse on Tahir's track, and then you were so hot that you spun that off into like your own career.
My own music career.
That's awesome.
You know, you remember like when Young Jeezy was on Boys in the Hood.
Right. No, but for real though, shout out to the Diversity Report, Tahir's podcast. So many cool guests and so many different people. Like one of the things I love about it is like it'll be like, you know, a serious business owner. Like the next week you have I can't remember the gentleman's name, the comedian that was on recently. Like it was so entertaining. You know, it's a really good diverse look at so many different types of people in the industry. Really interesting listen. Everybody should check it out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, man. And I appreciate that, you know, and it's actually so great. You know, all the, I would just say, I guess, critical acclaim that I've been receiving for it. It really was something that I thought of and came up with kind of like spur on the moment. When we launched the Social Equity Scholarship Program at NCIA, they let me go live on our Facebook channel to make an announcement. In the back of my head, like I've always enjoyed like making content and something, but it was the first opportunity that I had to do it for NCIA. So when I was with our social media manager, he's like, "Yo, you're really good at this. You want to come back and do something next week?" And as soon as he said that, I was like, I already had to. I kind of had to play in my mind. Like all you had to do is tell me that, right? So it's like I just came up the next week. I was like, you know, what am I going to do? So I came up with the idea for the show. And came on, man. It, like I said, really just spurred a moment, and it's turned into this dope thing. Last I checked, like last week, got listeners in like 28 countries. I got recognized as one of the top podcasts in the industry, and then even NCIA has gotten recognition for our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, including this. So again, it's just been an honor to have people gravitate to it. Wasn't something that I did for myself, but as I looked at the industry, I think one of the things that I realized is that as we discuss diversity, and as we often talk about people of color, we're often talking about like the challenges, right? How we can't get in the game, how we have problems with access to capital. So I thought it was important to kind of flip that lens a little bit and say, yes, these problems exist, but we want to tell the success stories of all the amazing, you know, people of color. Like that's so broad, right? There's ethnic diversity, there's sexual preference. There's geographic diversity. There's diversity in business. Like you said, it could be the CEO of Leafly or a comedian. And all these people have something valuable that they've contributed to the industry. And so having the opportunity to tell those stories, is something that I felt was missing, and also to be able to connect it back to the business as well. So it's kind of like you're putting the medicine there with the candy, as some people say.
Yeah, just be sure to go check out the #2 episode of all time now.
Yeah, episode of all time. Michigan, they ride out, man. They ride out for the Michigan fan, man.
Maybe listen to episode #2 with Chris first, and then go on to the rest of the episode.
That's the only one you really need to know. Like the other ones are optional, as long as you.
The #2 charted of all time.
It's been a real busy couple weeks. I was covering a little bit on the Senate committee with Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and Ron Wyden that are meeting with industry advocates. I believe there was one last week and one this week. I just checked my Robinhood. I think Tilray is like at $70 after hours now. So the stocks are booming off. Everybody that's getting mainstream coverage about the cannabis stocks. What stood out to you guys amidst all this movement in the industry in so many different areas?
Yeah, I'll pop it off. The thing that was most interesting, and I'll go back to that with Wyden, Booker, and the administration, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first meeting that they had, there weren't many cannabis related organizations on that call, most of which were civic and justice related organizations. The NCIA, the MCBA.
MCBA, yeah.
And then I think there was one more as well, Normal.
Yep.
Were some of the organizations that had access, which is a very positive place for the NCIA to be as a board member. However, it's really interesting that the tone of the conversation started around making sure that social justice and or criminal justice is at the forefront of the conversation. Now it's a matter of actually seeing that into fruition, right? Because we know how things can get drowned out over time, but it's a really positive thing to see that the very first conversation involved so many people from the social justice community, and I think that bodes well for opportunity when it comes to equity, inclusion, and diversity.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the fact that like you said that for one, if we're talking cannabis policy, I think we have to involve organizations that are legitimately about social justice, but we also need to involve, I think, stakeholders that come from communities of color, because I think that it's important to guide these conversations and pass the days of the politics of somebody else from the outside saying, we know what's good for your community, right? Like people from these communities need to also be stakeholders and parts of setting the table. So I'm really happy to have been for our organization, NCIA, to be a part of that, because one of the things that I've worked on, over the past year is making sure that our organizational structure really does reflect not only the current makeup of the industry, but what the current makeup of the industry should be. And that includes social equity, that includes people of color. Got brother Chris here on the board of directors, right? He kind of popped it off last year. And then now this year we were able to bring on 2 other great diverse people to the board. And that really goes across our policy council to the committees to, again, making sure that we can be a voice and representative of that, because I think that that's so critical to the success of the movement.
And I guess my only question ultimately is how soon this is actually going to move, right? And
right.
You know what I mean? How many different layers and levels of conversation are going to be had, right? Is there going to be a draft, right? So you got the conversation that's coming up this week, apparently. And then after that, then do they start to invite specific stakeholders from around the country? As a matter of fact, if anyone is watching this, share this with the Hill, because what they probably should do is get people from different backgrounds at different levels of business associated with the cannabis industry, bring them all together over the course of creating a task force and or a work group from all over the country, right? While I love love the East Coast, while I love California, the Midwest exists. You know what I'm saying? Down south exists.
Yep.
And then bring those stakeholders together that represent a diverse set of skills, businesses, ages, all of the things that Tahir
Yep.
kind of alluded to. Start building legislation off of the draft that you create to begin with from there. And then at that point, everyone takes a piece of the blame ultimately. But that also means that everybody's vested in the success of it, right? Which is the
Yeah.
main goal.
I totally agree with you, Chris. In fact, that kind of plays onto what I wanted to bring up too, was that I really hope that, because they made a nice statement. Cory Booker's office put out a really nice statement about putting the equity side of legalization first. Putting the expungement stuff. Or really emphasizing the social justice aspects of legalization. But my hope is that that's not just all just talk. I hope they can actually put some movement behind that. Those are the exact next steps I was going to say. It's talking to folks like you, Chris, in Michigan, and Tahir. I know you've done some stuff in Jersey and other places. Like, have these past experiences on a state level and have these experiences on high level industry committees to say, all right, like, how do we do it, and really listen, is not just have the meetings and really listen and really try to build on some of the stuff that has already been done.
Absolutely, that's going to be critical to it, making sure that you have the input and insight from the right people to help make these decisions, because again, this is it's something that's taking place in a moment in time, but this is something that will have lasting effects for generations to come. So it's something that we want to make sure we get it right. But I will say, maybe I'm biased as a Jersey guy, but having somebody like Cory Booker at the helm of it, I have to say that I kind of like it and trust it a little bit. Us folks, we be doing the thing right.
Yeah, man.
So
I was born in NJ,
you
so
hold Senator Booker accountable if this
Yeah,
goes
oh
through.
yeah, but we also have to hold our elected officials accountable, right? And I think
sure.
that's important. I think it's also important to say that kind of coming off of the heels of what we're coming out of. I think is I personally want to give the folks that are coming in here the benefit of the doubt. Because heck, I mean,
Right.
what other choice do we have?
Yeah, that's true. As long as the windows aren't getting broken down and the doors aren't getting kicked in,
Right.
at least we're making some progress. But yeah, that accountability is such a great point to hear. That's definitely something that everybody needs to think about, and not just on a federal level, but using that as kind of a transition point. We want to keep our local legislators and our local officials accountable. So, kind of transitioning, we've talked some about the Senate committee and the meetings they've had. Chris, maybe you want to talk a little bit about just upcoming stuff. Like locally, we saw Wisconsin is now making a surprise push to legalize. Tahir was talking about New Jersey. Here in Maryland, where we live, I was just at the policy conference on Saturday. We've got multiple bills to legalize. So, I mean, we're seeing a lot of stuff on the state level. How do you see that playing out the rest of this year, Chris? And maybe do you see that continuing to influence like federal policy, or are they still going to kind of slow down?
I'm skeptical about some of the states. I won't say directly which states I'm skeptical, but and the reason why I say that is because
I mean, Wisconsin is y'all's neighbors out there, right? Y'all are, yeah. So
the cheeseheads out there, agreement. Now, like and the reason why I'm skeptical is because really it just depends on the makeup of the government, right?
sure.
When you take a southern state that has traditionally not been favorable toward people of color, right? You can only imagine what type of laws they're putting into place. And it makes me also question, why are you putting those laws into place now, right? Is there a hidden agenda? Now, I don't want to say people just are intentionally bad, but history has a way of repeating itself if you allow it to. And so instead of allowing a ballot initiative like Michigan to pass, right? Which I think by and large is a good idea for municipalities and states to control their own destiny if they have an opportunity to, right? Because then it keeps big money from influencing ultimately what we see come out of that state in terms of legislation. However, like I said, depending on the makeup of the government, where their stance was previously, some of the things that they're saying, how hearings are going, how bill drafts are made up, it's likely that it won't be the equitable, and I don't just mean people of color being able to participate, but it won't end up small businesses won't have an opportunity necessarily to thrive, right, in the midst of everything that's going on. While I love autonomy from a state's perspective, and I think what the federal, at least I thought what the federal government was going to end up doing is I thought they were going to punt to the States Act, right, to allow them to basically construct whatever rules they see fit under a certain guise, right, a certain direction. Seems like they want to come up with an entire bill, right? The federal government wants to come up with an entire bill for federal legalization. While I appreciate autonomy at the state level because we've been dealing at the state level with cannabis longer than the federal government has, there's cause to pause based on the rhetoric that comes from that state when it comes to every other industry, right, that it's created legislation for.
Oh man, that's such a good point. And I think even as we talk about like what's going on with the states, it's interesting to see like in November, right? We had 5 states like legalized, but even the disparity in how even the disparity in how that legalization is actually being administered isn't all been created.
Special guest.
Yes, she's bringing me my laptop charger because it was about to die, man.
Sorry. Oh, nice. You're good, man.
If we go cut off, it'd just be dead in the middle of the
camera. Yeah, that would have ended the interview real quick.
Like I was saying, like there's just a disparity in the actual rollout of this legalization, right? Like we saw Arizona. They got it on and popping right out the gate. Like they're up and running. The adult use sales are already taking. My home state of New Jersey, like they're dragging their feet, right? The people have already voted it in, but they have yet to actually establish the legislation, right, on something that people already voted saying they want to have. And one of the biggest things holding it up is because they're arguing and going back and forth about whether they want charges for minors for cannabis. Something that you've already said you want it to be legal. So I don't see the point in perpetuating the war on drugs. One thing that was really interesting, the headline I read today that just blew my mind. I don't know if y'all heard this yet, but did you hear that South Dakota, like the ballot initiative got overturned? Right, so
overturned by a judge. Yep.
Right. So the court has overturned the will of the people and trying to get away with like a technicality and said, "Oh, well, you're supposed to call it like this, but you called it that, so it's invalid." So again, I think it's so crazy how we're seeing like this disparity in like what this legalization actually looks like, and so I think they're done. I think that having some type of like at least minimum standards or like like kind of regulatory structure in place federally would be good, but I think not to the detriment of the existing cannabis markets that have already like come in place. We don't need
for sure
just want to like disrupt like these operators that have already invested in. Like you said, there's already channels for distribution, consumers that are there's just so many things you don't want to disrupt, but there should be some type of oversight.
I'm glad you brought that up, Tahir. That was something I definitely wanted to touch on too, was the South Dakota stuff. And I mean, Tahir, you're here in the DMV. Like, it's just crazy to me every time I think about it that Virginia, with all of Virginia's history, is about to legalize before we're going to do it in Maryland. Like, that blows my mind if you know about Virginia and like what they've done in the past. But it just goes to show that it's so, like you were saying, Chris, it's some of them are for real and some of them are getting stuff done. And then some of them are just kind of, Tahir, like doing the Jersey thing and just dragging their feet.
Odd to me, because at the rate that Jersey is going, New York is going to have New York is going to have something ready to go before Jersey starts, and Jersey voted it in way before, man. Like
it's a mess.
It's odd, man, and what's going to end up happening, because I think we're seeing it at a super localized perspective. You're going to have states surrounding other states that are going to essentially gain the market in the way, where it's going to take away from the opportunity that a state had previously. And sometimes it makes sense because you want to make sure you get it right, whatever quote unquote right means, right? You want to get it as right as possible, particularly when you talk about equity. Take your time and get that shit right. I'm not mad at that.
Nah.
At the same time, though, there is an opportunity cost every day that you wait, right?
Yep.
Jersey, in this case, in some ways, is already seen as the little brother to New York. Jersey had a huge opportunity to be first with cannabis and established, and potentially gain more of a market than even New York could have had. But depending on how quickly New York moves now, it could be a very even market. And New York has more money, generally speaking, going than New Jersey does. And so states have to think about opportunity cost, because it's going to impact whether or not the economy in the cannabis industry is going to be as big as it should be.
And I think one other thing quickly, and then I'll let you respond, Tahir, but I mean, people are still getting arrested in New Jersey. Like, how are you still arresting people when it's fucking legal? Like, they voted on that, like that's the thing to me that's like, I don't know what Tahir, jump in here.
Still being arrested on it. My guy, shout out to my dude Ed NJ Weedman, and from my hometown in Trenton, he just got arrested and they like confiscated his cash. You know what I'm saying? Like again, like there's this disparity between like is it legal or is it not, right? Because people voted for it, and I think there's a lot of confusion out there. Technically, the way it stands now, it's not in New Jersey. I have one of my boys I grew up with at home has been, arrested for weed since it's been 2021. So wow, this is like this is a real deal. It really doesn't make any sense. And to the point of, getting it right the first time, I think that that is so important, because I think we could use Colorado as the perfect example, right? Like first adult use market, but they're just now getting to getting the social equity, and all these years. People from those communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs have been mostly left out of the opportunity. So it's great that they're getting it now, but they just did. I think they said $2 billion in revenue or something like that. So they're this is a mature market, right? In terms of I think taking the time to get the legislation right. This is going back to our original conversation on why it's important to have the right stakeholders all being a part of this conversation together, because it takes people from business, it takes people from advocacy, it takes people from social equity, it takes people from, mainstream to all come together and come up with the right solutions that work best to make a prosperous industry for everybody. I think the perfect example of that is Massachusetts, right? We just saw like the fallout from the CDA. A lot of companies ended up actually like leaving that, but that shows the power like that continues to remain in grassroots, right? Like this whole thing over I wish somebody would have gave them the memo, like what makes you think that it's okay to like lobby against like efforts of like social equity? Like if they had the right stakeholders that were part of that organization, they would have had, been able to tell them that out of the gate that would have probably been a bad idea and detrimental to the organization. And they just not good policy, and they wouldn't have done it. And so now we're here, even in New Jersey, I saw where like that power of the voices of the people coming and speaking up meant so much. And so, just again, everything that happened in 2020, we're at this place in society and culture where I just think we're going to see a lot more of this, and it's time to make sure that the people do the will of the people.
And thank you both for weighing in on that. Before we kind of wrap up and wind down, I want to hear from each of you guys either one prediction or one important takeaway for the audience that anything about the cannabis industry. I'll leave it broad, leave it open to you guys. But let's sign off with that.
Go ahead. We'll go with you first, Tahir.
All right, first, man. So first up, I'm going to say, and this is something that we didn't get to talk about. One of the things you asked about, I'm going to say that if you're not saving and investing, particularly if cannabis is not a part of your investment portfolio, man, you might want to change that. I've been telling people for
You've
like
been doing videos. I've seen
the
them.
past year and some change, right? And trying to explain it to people, and people have been like, "Oh, why would I want to invest in cannabis stocks? Are they going down?" That was the conversation I was having with people in 2019. So I
Yeah.
think it's important that as we look at the industry, let's view it this way, right? We're talking about something that is not even federally illegal yet. The industry made over $20 billion in 2020, and it's expected to double that within the next 5 years. So we're talking about over $40 billion in revenue. You can invest in a company that, so in most places, there's limited markets. There's not that many opportunities. It's not easy to get licenses and build these multi-million-dollar companies. So you have the opportunity to invest in one of these companies very early on, right? That has not even experienced probably the biggest tailwind that's going to cause these companies to grow in the future. Yes, there will be some winners and losers, and no, I don't think you take all your money and like bet it on black, because then that's not investing, like that's gambling.
Right.
But I think that if you kind of carve out like what is a place in your portfolio for it, and just ironically today, like over the last 2 days, this video I did about 4 stocks that you could invest in, at any budget, right, using Cash App or Robinhood. Man, one of them was up over like 50% today. Like every single one was up in the double digits. I had one of my boys I went to college with tell me he made like 50 racks off of these. I'm like, dang, I wish I had that type of money. Hey, brother, I wish I was a financial advisor. At least back then I got paid when my clients made anyway, like I said, I think that, just look at it as like, this is like the opportunity to invest in like tech stocks in the 90s. It's like buying Apple in the 90s and then some. You're going to see some fluctuation and volatility, but I personally don't look at cannabis as a trade. It's not something where I buy it and like, oh, I see it go up a little bit, I'm going to sell it.
Right.
I think that this is a long-term game. So I would say definitely look at investing. Check out my videos. My social handles,
Sure.
Diddy on every platform. That's TAHDIDDY. Places like LinkedIn and Facebook, of course, is my real name, Tahir Johnson. Look me up, man. Check out my YouTube channel. Got all types of videos. And the CANiVISDiversityReport.com. You can check out all of my episodes and all that from the podcast, man.
Super fire.
Not P Diddy, but T Diddy in the building. And I happen to have some insider baseball information about some things coming down the pipeline that we definitely need to bring them back on the show to discuss in the very near future. But I won't
back to back. I'm down.
I won't spoil it. We'll have them back soon though. I think that's a good note to end on. And I think Tahir is right when he says that there's an opportunity, especially for the people who may not ever hold a lottery ticket, right? And own a license. You know what I'm saying? There's a way in which people can still participate in stocks is just that. But we're talking about stocks when Apple was just beginning as a company, right? When you consider the infancy of the cannabis industry. So you may not have a golden ticket in owning a license, but there's certainly opportunity to own a piece of companies who will probably sustain for a fairly long time because something is getting ready to become federally legal.
Heck yeah, man. And I can't wait for Sticky to go public, man. I'm all on that joint. I know Jackson is
we'll see. I can't wait either.
Man, shout out to Sticky. Well, thank you guys very much. Tahir, thank you for being a very special guest on this week's episode. We really appreciate it. Chris, as always, thank you for rocking with me, brother. It's been an awesome journey so far. Looking forward to the future. And both of y'all keep rocking and keep doing what you're doing. And we'll see y'all soon. Thank y'all for checking us out. See you next time on the CANiVISION Policy Report.